Test, test. We're just testing before we go live here. 1 p.m. Pacific time is when the Tolkien Society meeting will actually start. Just checking to make sure everything's ready to go first. Testing, testing. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1. Testing, testing. Okay, good. So we verified it's working. So we'll be back at 1 p.m. Since that's the correct meaning, just to be pedantic about it. All right, hello and welcome to the Eä Tolkien Society. I'm the founder, Hawk Robinson. We are an official Smial of the UK Tolkien Society. We've been operating since 2005. Also, next month, September 19th, we have our annual Tolkien Moot. It'll be Tolkien Moot 16. So I hope you'll join us then. Today we're kind of low on attendance, but fortunately Chris is here. Hello, Chris. How you doing?
Greetings. I'm here.
Yeah.
Welcome from the South Farthing.
Yes, indeed. So it will be, unless somebody else drops in now. Actually, I should be on my other laptop. I need to monitor the channels for any comments. How's the background noise since I got all these air purifiers running because of the smoke?
Fine for me.
Okay.
You're gonna hear a baby screeching on my end.
Okay. Well, when you're not speaking, make sure you mute it.
Yes, indeed.
Can't do that on my end easily, unfortunately, with this setup. But let me get into Discord here. Get in the right account. So we will go over last month's notes, which I think Brian kindly provided, and I actually got them uploaded fairly quickly early on. And then we'll go into our normal open discussion. Let's see here, let me finish getting logged in.
Back. Notes. Okay.
Okay, and there's Tolkien Scholars Discord. And I'm going to get the link for this channel posted into there for this broadcast, see if anybody in Discord gets pinged by it. See if we can't get a few people to show up. Tolkien Scholars Discord. And come on, website. Got the reminders out. I did the social media thing, but I think people are just burned out on the online thing at this point. But do what we can. I know they are. I have clients who just said they really are sick and tired of video conferencing. They miss human interaction. All right, so got that in our Discord. Put it on our Twitter. Do you know about our Discord? Do you know about our Discord channel? Have you been in there at all? That's the chat room.
I have I've signed up,
Okay.
but I haven't done anything in it. I've got a couple other Discord items, so I figured while I was going to start using Discord, I might as well. So,
Right.
So, yep, I got the 2 notes here, so
Okay.
good.
Just helps have somebody else monitoring the channel besides me. Okay. All right. I tweeted it. Got it on YouTube. We're in Discord. I don't know what more I can do. I guess it's going to just be one of those. It might be a short meeting today. Do you want to cover the notes, or would you like me to?
I can cover the notes.
Okay.
Okay, Eä Tolkien Society meeting notes, July 2020. Welcome by Hawk. Read notes from June discussion, July 4th Tolkien seminar, which I participated in for a bit and enjoyed some of the topics very well and enjoyed some of the topics not so much. Which seminars are just like that.
Yep.
Tolkien book cover illustration, LOTR Prime update. Tolkien Moot postponed to September 19th because of Gen Con. Next meeting, August 15th. Finished discussing the notes for an hour. Discuss The Fall and Rise of Numenor, 3 excerpts from Tolkien and the Silmarillion by Clyde S. Kilby, discussion of the Houses of Men and the House of Elves, and the case of the Dunedain and Roses, letters 175, 176, and 177, and conclusion.
Okay.
So, yes.
What's that?
So that's it for that.
Well, you made short work of that. So 177 is the last one we covered. So, okay. So, a reminder: next month we have we have a Tolkien Society in the middle of Tolkien Moot. So it'll be a normal Saturday 1 to 3 time. But since it's Tolkien Moot, we will hopefully have some special guests and panels and such. So Brian has been speaking to several people who are invested in Tolkienology, if you will. And let me find his little list here. I think he was talking, he's spoken, I think, 4 or 5 people. We're not sure which ones. I think we've got 2 confirmations. Excuse me. And so, potential speakers. So, he suggested the following: Brenton Dickinson, a blogger; John Garth; Professor David Mosley; Sarah Zama; Sean Marchese; and of course Michael Martinez. Especially since the theme this year, we're circling back to our roots in 2005 with Numenor. Tolkien Moot's 16th theme is about the rise of Numenor, the gift bringers and such as they come back to Middle Earth. We're going to be doing at least 3 years of Numenor themes. I wrote 4 or 5 modules, adventure modules on the topic, and so really did researched everything I could find at the time between 2005 and 2008 on Numenor. And so because most of the people now in Tolkien Society and Tolkien Moot were not there. Michael Martinez was there back in 2006, but we did Under Umbar for that one. It was after the fall of Numenor. Brian is trying to get some confirmation on the speakers. We'll have that posted on our TolkienScholars.org website as we get them nailed in. The RSVP is now up and running. You can join in person or remotely, whether it's for games or for just the Tolkien Society part. Take your pick. Just go to www.tolkienscholars.org. You can just go to tolkienscholars.org and click the RSVP link, and then /RSVP. And it's a pretty lengthy form because we want to know who's doing what and what, so we can be prepared for you. And in person, on site, we're limited on how many people we can have, but we have like 7 different rooms that we can do these in, so we can keep people spaced out between the game rooms and such. And then for the Tolkien Society meeting, we've got some big spaces we can spread out in, and of course online. So online, for the Tolkien Society meeting, we have no limits, so if you just want to join us for the Tolkien Society meeting from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. with the special guests, just sign up for that online, and we can handle hundreds and hundreds of people there, no problem. Because we just did this with WorldCon and Gen Con, and Jitsi did well. If you want to do the games, we're going to be limited to probably just 2 or 3 rooms, 4 rooms at most as usual. So you can do those either in person or online. You can also sign up for those separately. We're only going to probably have 2 game systems available. The One Ring role-playing game, assuming Brian is available, and Adventures in Middle-earth, which is based on Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, but with the One Ring role-playing game tweaks to it. Those will be the 2 game system choices that people can choose, unless somebody wants to run some other version. So that's coming up for next month, and excited, and that's going to be September 19th, Saturday. Doors open at 7:30 a.m. Pacific time. We do our opening ceremonies at 8, which usually take about 10 or 15 minutes. Then we get everybody seated and we start gaming at 8:30. Then we take occasional breaks. Then from 1 to 3 p.m., give or take, we do our Tolkien Society meeting. Then we take another break, and then we continue more gaming and more breaks until 10 o'clock at night Pacific time, and wrap up then. So we hope people will join us. Any questions or comments about that, Chris? What's your intentions as far as participating?
I'll probably show up for the society meeting,
Okay.
1 to 3.
Okay. Will you probably just be remote?
Likely, I'm not 100% certain.
Okay.
We might have a reason to be in Spokane.
Okay. I look forward to it. Oh, I got the wrong thing capturing here.
Okay.
Hang on, I'm fixing something on the video here. It keeps fighting me on my setup. There we go, that's what I wanted. And that down. That's better. Okay. Alright. So, you had said you had a little bit of stuff you wanted to cover?
Sure, there's I heard Tom, she's no longer with the project.
Tom,
New
she's
Zealand,
no longer with the Amazon Lord of the Rings series? Okay.
Yeah.
What happened?
We're not certain, but this does not bode well for authenticity of the series.
Right.
They've got 20 episodes lined out,
Okay.
and they've taken the time while filming has been on pause to work on season 2 writing.
Okay.
But they can't say anything about it,
Right.
of course.
Right.
And apparently New Zealand is having a little bit of resource challenge because New Zealand is wide open. They're not on lockdown. So American and other companies are all trying to film in New Zealand. You've got James Cameron doing Avatar, do it there. You've got various other projects. There's 47 local projects and 6 foreign projects with a total of 7,000 jobs related to all these projects, and they're running out of people to be able to and studio area to be able to juggle all these things.
Wow.
So
that's interesting.
It's kind of interesting. You have a little slice of the world that has no disease, and everybody flocks there under quarantine. You know, you have to spend 14 days in quarantine, but after that, then you're open and you can do whatever in terms of filming and other stuff. So the world has come to New Zealand for filming. So it's
well, that's good for them financially because everybody else is, you know, will be continuing to suffer worse and worse. So that's interesting. Wow, that is an interesting challenge for them to have. It is. It looks like such a beautiful.
And so they say they're supposed. Yeah, they say they're supposed to start filming again within the next couple weeks.
Okay.
But the news just broke that they had more cases after going a record 102 days with 0 cases. So we'll see if they shut people down or not.
Yep. We'll see what happens.
But Avatar has been filming, so
okay.
That's a film that I would like to watch.
Okay.
So. And
what else do you have?
Not much on that front.
Okay. Well, that is interesting, though. We'll have to see how that unfolds. That's too bad that Shippy's out of it, because that definitely does sound like they're... Because they don't have any other really decent consultants now, do they, for Tolkien?
Yeah, let's not bring Jackson back in, please.
No. Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness.
Maybe Michael Martinez should volunteer.
Yeah, that would be great. I think he always puts his name out there, but there's politics with him, so he gets.
Oh, sure.
Unfortunately, yeah, kind of gets ignored when and that's really unfortunate. I think he's a great resource. He's not afraid to balance the the authentic canon with conjecture, but do the conjecture in a believable internal consistency way, which is what they really need.
Yeah,
instead of all or nothing.
And that's precisely what you need during second age.
Exactly.
Because you have no idea.
And he's really good at analyzing the internal consistency so that you can keep it the same across, which unfortunately they do all or nothing. They either go too much canon or just completely off the rails. And that becomes disruptive for those of us who care about it. We're okay with some internal consistency made up, artistic license, as long as there's some internal consistency. But Jackson went completely off the rails with that with each release. Right? He started out okay and then got more and more off the rails. And it didn't even hold up internally.
Yeah.
And so that would be great if they would have Michael Martinez, definitely.
Yeah. We finished The Hobbit, and then my children had the opportunity to watch the 1977 Rankin and Bass version, and
how'd they like that?
That they liked very well. And in terms of consistency, and in terms of the concept of a children's story, it does a very good job of wrapping wrapping it up into a nice 2-hour presentation. There are, of course, there are topical cuts, but they're minor, and all the major pieces of the story are there.
Right.
So yes.
Yeah.
So that I don't object to very much.
Right. Yeah. That's what they don't seem to get. Is it's not the artistic license that we have an issue with. It's just that bad storytelling.
Yeah. Netflix is going to do The Magician's Nephew as a release. I'm not exactly sure when it's being released, but they picked that up from Walden Media, and they're going to run with it.
Okay.
So I'm highly concerned about consistency between A, the BBC series, B, Walden Media, and C, Netflix.
Right. Yeah.
So
have to see how that unfolds.
Yeah, we're currently reading The Silver Chair to our children. So
okay.
The BBC version of that is open, and our library's open back up on the 25th, finally, maybe, for curbside pickup. So I've got the BBC versions on hold, so
okay.
We should be watching those in a couple weeks.
Cool.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Nope, not.
Okay. I don't have anything other than Tolkien Society and, getting ready to release my Numenor notes to the upcoming Game Masters for them to start prepping, which means I have to start refreshing because, as usual, most of my modules kind of start out, the tail end ones aren't usually finished by the time we launch. So this is a chance for me to kind of polish off and update some of them before. So I'm going to be re-immersing myself coming this week back into the whole Numenorian thing. And 3 of the good sources besides Tolkien's letters are, of course, the Silmarillion, right, with the Akalabeth, which is a short summary, a good summary of the Arc of Numenor. And then you can get more depth with Unfinished Tales. And then also more depth with The Lost Road.
Oh, yes.
Right? It starts out with the Fall of Numenor and The Lost Road, the early history of the legend, the Fall of Numenor, the original outline, the first version, the second version, further development, and then the Lost Road opening chapters, Numenorian chapters, and unwritten chapters. So that's a good 77 pages of content there, just dedicated to Numenor in the Lost Road. So that's a great resource for ideas. Now, some of it's not applicable to what we're doing, but it all has really good content. And of course, the Unfinished Tales. Maybe it's been suggested by Brian and others that I should make all of the Game Masters read just the Akalabeth as just, because it's only like, I think 17 pages or something. Let me pull it up here. To help them just get the arc of, it's a little longer than that. I'm trying to remember how many pages it is. Let's see here. It's 25 pages, but have them all read the Akalabeth to prepare themselves for it. And it doesn't spoil anything for the adventures, and it's a great primer for discussion. So when we start Tolkien Moot 16, we're starting with when the Numenorians come back to Middle-earth. How would you feel about me reading from the Akalabeth starting today?
That would be fine.
Do you have a copy yourself?
I don't.
So we can alternate?
I do not have a copy myself.
Okay. All right. Would you be interested in me doing that, or would you rather just focus on letters?
Well, if you do 5 pages or so, that would be fine. But
yeah, not the whole thing. We're gonna discuss it, obviously.
Yeah.
Because we only need, for this year, we're just talking about the gift bringers, right? When they first come back to Middle Earth. Then next year, we talk about the rise of Numenor and how they start. They're coming more as conquerors rather than gift bringers. And then the following year, we get into the downfall. And that could spread over 4 years, but I think we can cover it in 3 years. We'll see. So I'll go ahead and read. I'll just read up to where they're gift bringers and then when it transitions. I think that'll fit.
Okay.
And this sets the tone for what's coming next month. Akalabeth, the downfall of Numenor. It is said by the Eldar that men came into the world in the time of the shadow of Morgoth, and they fell swiftly under his dominion. For he sent his emissaries among them, and they listened to his evil and cunning words, and they worshipped the darkness, and yet feared it. But there were some that turned from evil and left the lands of their kindred, and wandered ever westward. For they had heard a rumor that in the west there was a light which the shadow could not dim. The servants of Morgoth pursued them with hatred, and their ways were long and hard. Yet they came at last to the lands that look upon the sea, and they entered Beleriand in the days of the War of the Jewels. The Edain, these were named in the Sindarin tongue, and they became friends and allies of the Eldar, and did deeds of great valor in the war against Morgoth. Of them was sprung, upon the side of his fathers, bright Eärendil. And in the Lay of Eärendil it is told how at the last, when the victory of Morgoth was almost complete, he built his ship Vingalat that men call Rothenzil, and voyaged upon the unsailed seas, seeking ever for Valinor, for he desired to speak before the powers on behalf of the two kindreds, that the Valar might have pity on them and send them help in their uttermost need. Therefore, by elves and men he is called Eärendil the Blessed, for he achieved his quest after long labors and many perils, and from Valinor there came the host of the lords of the west. But Eärendil never came back to the lands that he had loved. In the great battle, when at last Morgoth was overthrown and Thangorodrim was broken, the Edain alone of the kindreds of men fought for the Valar, whereas many others fought for Morgoth. And after the victory of the lords of the west, those of the evil men who were not destroyed fled back into the east, where many of their race were still wandering in the unharvested lands, wild and lawless, refusing alike the summons of the Valar and of Morgoth. And the evil men came among them, and cast over them a shadow of fear, and they took them for kings. Then the Valar forsook for a time the men of Middle-earth who had refused their summons, and had taken the friends of Morgoth to be their masters. And men dwelt in darkness, and were troubled by many evil things that Morgoth had devised in the days of his dominion, demons, and dragons, and misshapen beasts, and the unclean orcs that are mockeries of the children of Ilúvatar. And the lot of men was unhappy. But Manwë put forth Morgoth and shut him beyond the world and the void that is without. And he cannot himself return again into the world, present and visible, while the lords of the west are still enthroned. Yet the seeds that he had planted still grew and sprouted, bearing evil fruit, if any would tend them. For his will remained, and guided his servants, moving them ever to thwart the will of the Valar, and to destroy those that obeyed them. This the lords of the west knew full well. When, therefore, Morgoth had been thrust forth, they held counsel concerning the ages that should come after. The Eldar they summoned to return into the west, and those that hearkened to the summons dwelt in the isle of Eressëa. And there is in that land a haven that is named Avalorne, for it is of all cities the nearest to Valinor, and the Tower of Avalone is the first sight that the mariner beholds when at last he draws nigh to the undying lands of the leagues of the sea. To the fathers of men of the three faithful houses rich reward also was given. Eonwe came among them and taught them, and they were given wisdom and power and life more enduring than any others of mortal race have possessed. A land was made for the Edain to dwell in, neither part of Middle-earth nor of Valinor, for it was sundered from either by a wide sea, yet it was nearer to Valinor. It was raised by Osse out of the depths of the great water, and it was established by Aule and enriched by Yavanna, and the Eldar brought thither flowers and fountains out of Tol Eressëa. That land of Valar called Andor, the land of gift. And the star of Eärendil shone bright in the west as a token that all was made ready, and as a guide over the sea. And men marveled to see that silver flame in the paths of the sun. Then the Edain set sail upon the deep waters, following the star. And the Valar laid a peace upon the sea for many days, and sent sunlight and a sailing wind, so that the waters glittered before the eyes of the Edain like rippling glass, and the foam flew like snow before the stems of their ships. But so bright was Rothanzil that even at morning men could see it glimmering in the west, and in the cloudless night it shone alone, for no other star could stand beside it. And setting their course towards it, the Edain came at last over leagues of sea, and saw afar the land that was prepared for them, Andor, the land of gift, shimmering in a golden haze. Then they went up out of the sea and found a country fair and fruitful, and they were glad. And they called that land Elena, which is starwards, but also Anadune, which is westerness, Numenore in the high Eldarin time. This was the beginning of that people that in the Grey Elven speech are called the Dunedain, the Numenorians, kings among men. But they did not thus escape from the doom of death that Ilúvatar had set upon all mankind. And they were mortal still, though their years were long. And they knew no sickness, ere the shadow fell upon them. Therefore they grew wise and glorious, and in all things more like to the firstborn than others of the kindreds of men. And they were tall, taller than the tallest of the sons of Middle-earth. And the light of their eyes was like the bright stars. But their numbers increased only slowly in the land, for though daughters and sons were born to them, fairer than their fathers, yet their children were few. So then it goes into a while describing the geography. Do you want to discuss any of that so far? We're going to skip the geography, but want to talk about any of that so far?
Well, yeah, an observation. What, to Tolkien, is the significance of the West versus the East? He seems to, in his entire universe, point the West as the light and the East as darkness.
Do you have thoughts on that?
I wonder, where does Tolkien get that thought, that concept from?
Yeah, I wonder, I mean, if you go, because he was pulling from, obviously a lot of lore of previous cultures from centuries back, either before generally the discovery of the Americas, and the great sundering sea to the west of Europe and everything, the unknown, right? There be dragons type situation. Perhaps he was inspired by those same mythologies to look that direction.
Yeah, I'm looking at the gifts. I'm enumerating the gifts as we go.
Right.
Long life, knowing no sickness, growing wise, having a land raised out of water, which could be like, obviously it's Atlantis, but I'm thinking of real geography like Ireland or,
well, and
heaven forbid, Iceland.
Right.
Or
and And he also, the Arthurian mythology too, also looked west for where the Ladies of the Mist, Avalon.
Yeah. So those are interesting observations of how the mythos, other mythos, is being drawn into his mythos. It's not copying, it's research.
No, it's not. It is interesting. I wonder if anybody has done any research on that, on his focus on the West. Because if you look at some other literature, it's the mythical East that's fantastic and such in some cultures, right?
Certainly.
Orientalism and such.
Yeah, and or Indian. I'm thinking of what's his name? The one who wrote children's stories, Just So stories. Rudyard Kipling always had a fascination of the East.
Right. Yeah. I think they summarize it, in Victorian era and such as Orientalism and Oriental. There's a term for romanticizing, and I think it all falls under that term. Yeah. So it is interesting because a lot of his peers were mythologizing the East, but he focused West.
Is that just being contrarian, or did he see something in the literature that his peers did not?
Yeah, I don't know.
I wonder.
And, the vast ocean, right, from where he was in England, you stare off across the vastness of the ocean, and it is vast.
Yeah.
And that certainly has a mythology of infinite possibilities beyond, it would seem.
Cool. Okay, onward.
Okay. So I'm skipping the geography description of the lands and such. Talks about Elros and Elrond and Eärendil. Elros lived to 500 years and ruled Númenóreans 400 years and 10. And so while the years passed, while Middle-earth went backwards and light and wisdom faded, the Dunedain dwelt under protection of the Valar and the friendship of the Eldar, and increased in stature both of mind and body. And then they kind of started to develop their own tongue based on some of the Elvish tongue, etc. This is where he branches off into yet another language of his 19 created languages or so. That was my last count. Is it still 19, or have there been more counted of his created languages?
I don't know.
Okay. The number still in my head is 19. I'd love a correction if anybody knows better than that. But one of the key things was that the lords of Valinor forbade them to sail so far westward that the coasts of Númenor can no longer be seen. And for long the Dunedain were content, though they did not fully understand the purpose of this ban. So it was the ban of the West. It's important people understand that, because later that's critical for the fall, but not necessary for the rise, though it explains part of the rise, because they go east instead of west. And Manwë did not want the Númenóreans to be tempted to seek the Blessed Realm and overpass the limits set up to their bliss, becoming enamored of the immortality of the Valar and Eldar, the lands where all things endure. So this is while Valinor was still visible on the world. So this became the ban of the Valar, or the ban of the West. And so the voyages in those days went ever eastward and ever westward, from the darkness of the north to the heats of the south, and beyond the south to the nether darkness. And they came even into the inner seas, and sailed about Middle-earth, and glimpsed from their high prows the gates of morning in the east. And the Dunedain came at times to the shores of the great lands, and they took pity on the forsaken world of Middle-earth. So this is what we're setting up for next month, is they show up, They see living in terror and poverty and primitive lives there, and they feel, pity towards what's happened to the people in Middle-earth. So the lords of Numenor set foot again upon the western shores, and this is some centuries, many centuries later, since they left. And none yet dared to withstand them. For most of the men of that age that sat under the shadow were now grown weak and fearful. And coming among them, the Numenorians taught them many things. Corn and wine they brought, and they instructed men in the sowing of seed and the grinding of grain, in the hewing of wood and the shaping of stone, and in the ordering of their life, such as it might be in the lands of swift death and little bliss. Then the men of Middle-earth were comforted, and here and there upon the western shores the houseless woods drew back, and men shook off the yoke of the offspring of Morgoth, and unlearned their terror of the dark. And they revered the memory of the tall sea kings, and when they had departed they called them gods, hoping for the return. For at that time the Numenorians dwelt never long in Middle-earth, nor made there as yet any habitations of their own. Eastward they must sail, but ever west their heart returns. So the key thing is we have no Numenorian ports, they don't remain, they're explorers and gift bringers. And that's the name of the first module, the first contacts is the gift bringers. Now this yearning grew ever greater.
So,
go ahead.
So you've got 3 tasks, 3 gifts here. Agriculture, hewing of wood and stone.
Yeah, lumber and masonry,
Yeah, and ordering their lives.
Yep. And shaking off their fear of the darkness.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
And a little bit of technology because they're grinding of grain.
Yeah.
Tied into the agriculture, but still. So that's that first wave there that was, at the beginning of those, literally the seeds they planted. Now this yearning grew ever greater with the years, and the Numenorians began to hunger for the undying city that they saw from afar. Remember, if they went to the very top of Meneltarma, the top of the mountain of Numenor, they could just see a glint over the horizon. And the desire of everlasting life to escape from death and the ending of delight grew strong upon them. And ever as their power and glory grew greater, their unquiet increased. For though the Valar had rewarded the Dunedain with long life, they could not take from them the weariness of the world that comes at last, and they died, even their kings of the seed of Eärendil, and the span of their lives was brief in the eyes of the Eldar. Thus it was that a shadow fell upon them, in which maybe the will of Morgoth was at work that still moved in the world. And the Numenorians began to murmur, at first in their hearts, and then in open words, against the doom of men, and most of all against the ban, which forbade them to sail into the west. And they said among themselves, Why do the lords of the west sit there in peace unending? Well, we must die, and go we know not whither, leaving our home and all that we have made. And the Eldar die not, even those that rebelled against the lords. Since we have mastered all seas, and no water is so wild or so wide that our ships cannot overcome it, why should we not go to Avalone and greet there our friends? And some there were who said, Why should we not go even to Aman, and taste there, were it but for a day, the bliss of the powers? Have we not become mighty among the people of Arda? The Eldar reported these words to the Valar, and Manwë was grieved, seeing a cloud gather on the noontide of Numenor. And he sent messengers to the Dunedain, who spoke earnestly to the king, and to all who would listen concerning the fate and fashion of the world. The doom of the world, they said, one alone can change who made it. And were you to voyage that, escaping all deceits and snares, you came indeed to Aman, the blessed realm, little would it profit you. For it is not the land of Manwë that makes its people deathless, but the deathless that dwell therein have hallowed the land. And there you would but wither and grow weary the sooner, as moths in a light too strong and steadfast. But the king said, Does not Eärendil my forefather live, or is he not in the land of Aman? To which they answered, You know that he has a fate apart, and was adjudged to the firstborn who die not, yet this also is his doom, that he can never return again to mortal lands. Whereas you and your people are not of the firstborn, but are mortal men, as Iluvatar made you. Yet it seems that you desire now to have the good of both kindreds, to sail to Valinor when you will, and to return when you please to your homes. That cannot be. Nor can the Valar take away the gifts of Iluvatar. The Eldar, you say, are unpunished, and even those who rebel do not die. Yet this is to them neither reward nor punishment, but the fulfillment of their being. They cannot escape, and are bound to this world, never to leave it so long as it lasts, for its life is theirs. And you are punished for the rebellion of men, you say, in which you had small part, and so it is that you die. But that was not at first appointed for a punishment. Thus you escape, and leave the world, and are not bound to it in hope or in weariness. Which of us, therefore, should envy the others? So that continues, and so this is now the noontide of Numenor, right? As he describes it. And it goes through the various kings as they continue to grow, and this is when they start to come back to Middle-earth, but more to take the resources away from Middle-earth to take back to Numenor, because they've depleted their trees and resources to build their more and more of their mighty armada and such. And so then they start coming to Middle-earth a little less friendly and more as lords of Middle-earth. They're not quite, evil despots, but they are coming more as lords who demand tribute and such. And that's what we'll be looking at next year.
So given a Star Wars theme, where along the line from the Senate to the mighty empire to the Armada are we? No, joking. So so when there is a limitation of resources, there tends to come with it a bit of imperialism.
Yes. They have to explain to themselves.
Western culture, at least.
Yeah, they have to justify to themselves going and taking from others as justified in some way.
Yeah.
Manifest destiny, things like that. So they come back to Middle-earth. First they came as gift bringers. They weren't taking, they were giving. Then they come back, and that'll be next year's focus. Is they're not evil, but they're starting to shift, and they're a little bit tyrannical, a little bit more kind of in the way of the old Greek tyrannies that there was some allotment of allowing for them to have that power because they brought so much benefit, right? By setting up ports and such, they helped make the land safer, driving back the minions of Mordor and of Morgoth and such. And
you mean like the stage of Google Do No Evil?
Yeah.
before they dropped the Do No Evil tagline.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. That's why we're using Jitsi now and not Google Hangouts.
Right.
And then the year after is when they actually rise up and take Sauron. He surrenders without a fight because their forces are so overwhelming. He just goes, "You got me. I give. I'm not even going to try." And then, of course, he has his cunning plan and whispers poison in Ar-Pharazôn's ear, which then leads to the fall of Numenor as he sends his armada west, and then the destruction of Numenor. And so that's either year 3 or 4 of this arc that we're doing in the coming 3 to 4 years. Because the Gift Bringers phase might go more than 1 year because there's a lot of phases to it. Because I said I wrote like 6 different modules. When I originally did this, we did a marathon MERPCon, Tolkien back in '07. We had 5 tables running, each a different game system, and we were gaming Friday, Saturday, Sunday, just hardcore, like from 8 a.m. till midnight or 2 a.m., whatever, just boom, boom, boom. The Guild Companion wrote one of the participants who worked for the Guild Companion wrote a long article about the experience, about the MERPCon overdose. And he did a whole kind of parallel of fear and loathing of Las Vegas to this intense gaming experience. But it was very entertaining. I think it was Joe, I forget his last name, but he did a great article on that, which you can still find freely on there. But I wrote it to have that many hours of gaming, right? It was like 24, 30 hours of game time. So, and each one kind of wraps up as a module. So, obviously we can't do all of that in one, because our Tolkien right now is only one day, which only works out to about, I think, 12 hours of game time, at best.
Yep.
Might only be 9 hours. It's 9 or 12, I forget which. I have to look at I think it's 9 hours, actually, 3 sessions. So, because we're allowing more socializing. So really, we might end up having to do a couple of years of the... So I wrote the series as First Contacts, plural, with an S, because it was, they kind of came and went a few different times, and then there was a long gap, and then they come back more as the Conquerors. So we will probably, it's very possible we may end up continuing this theme at another level next year, depending upon what the people vote for, right? The participants that show up. They get to decide the theme each year for the following year. But yeah, so that's a little bit of a taste of what's coming. There's a lot more depth to that whole arc that just lightly goes over in the Silmarillion. Goes into far more depth than Unfinished Tales and Lost Road. A lot more depth. And a little bit in the Tolkien's notes as well, that really explain, the building of the shadow in Numenor and the splitting between the Dunedain, the faithful, and the later called Black Numenorians, but the King's Men, who end up following and worshiping Morgoth eventually, and sacrificing the Dunedain in great fires, right, in the capital city in the final years and such. That Sauron led them to build the temples and such. So they really, really, really fall hard. And it spans, I think it's a few thousand years that the arc spans. I have to refresh my memory on that. You have anything you want to talk about related to any of that?
Well, I'm wondering how the modules will incorporate each one of these gifts, and that kind of almost being a goal or a prize to get to a certain level.
Yeah, I didn't go into. So yeah, what I did is the first adventure is the people get to pick whether they want to be Numenorians or Middle-earth people, right? And so they may end up meeting each other as strangers, and they have a common enemy of driving back the attacks. So all of them are living. So the people of Middle-earth are living in primitive huts along the shoreline when the Numenorians arrive. So it's a very tense encounter at first. And you got to role play through that encounter. And then, once they can get across the language barrier, it's because every night is a night of terror, right? When the sun sets, the creatures of all the dense woods come out, and it's terrible. But here, the Numenorians, for the first time, give them a night without terror. And so it's really focused more on that terror aspect. The gift comes later, but first, it's kind of Maslow's hierarchy. You got to feel safe first, so you can go to the next level of getting fed and planning. You can't really plan ahead when every night you think you're going to be snatched away by some horrible creature out of the dark. right? It's just survival, bare bone survival. So the Numenorians just first bring on that safety buffer for the first time ever. They can actually sleep through the night, and then be rested enough to start thinking beyond just the next morning, right?
Yeah.
So that's the first adventure. The first section is just that, just the awareness of that terror. Then from there they get to go towards, okay, now let's expand the lands a little bit, learn to cultivate the lands. Let's get a little bit of technology going. Let's go beyond this primitive eking out just a bare bones survival to being able to survive a year of drought or famine. Actually having storage and being ready to survive. Now starting to look longitudinally over years rather than just days, and kind of progresses from there. I don't think we'll be able to fit. So the big finale is that the minions of the region start to get angry about the lands being claimed and taken away, right? So in the big finale, which probably won't be able to fit into this year's session, is I called it the Dirty Dozen, but it's reversed.
Yeah.
They really are dirty, and they're the bad guys. There's a dozen really bad guys that you have to go up against to finally set this part of Middle-earth free of their tyranny. So that then when the Numenorians leave, there's a little bit of buffer space to breathe and grow on their own. The Numenorians don't, because if the Numenorians just show up, clear the creatures immediately around, teach them a few things, then leave, and then the baddies just come right back in and take over, it doesn't last.
Oh.
You've got to take out some of the infrastructure of evil that's in the immediate area, so that the people of Middle Earth have a chance to spend for themselves, and that's how that wraps up, and that probably will end up happening next year. So this year everybody starts kind of more mid-level, and then we wrap up the following year at a higher level. Right, is generally how I'm thinking, roughly how it'll be. But we'll see. We're early in the stages of breaking this up, because again, this all happened in 3 days. Went through the whole process quite intensely. So we'll see. But yeah, it ties in a little bit, but as I said, the early sessions are just about survival and the terror of the night and overcoming that fear, right? It taught them to no longer fear. So that was the first step. Let me go back to that. So in coming among the Numenorians taught them many things. Corn and wine they brought, and they instructed men in the sowing of seed and the grinding of grain, in the hewing of wood and the shaping of stone and the ordering of life, such as it might be in the lands of swift death and little bliss. So there was still that. So then it says, then the men of Middle-earth were comforted, and here and there upon the western shores the houseless woods drew back, and men shook off the yoke of the offspring of Morgoth, and unlearned their terror of the dark. So that's kind of the key thing I focus on in this initial adventure, is shaking off that terror of the dark.
So, M. Night Shyamalan's movie, The Village, might
right.
Might be applicable here.
Yes, that is applicable, yes. Hadn't thought of that correlation, but yeah, I can see a linkage there. Yep. And I do, with the adventure, I have all the horrors of the night that Middle-earth can offer for them to deal with. But fortunately, everybody's fairly mid-level, so they're not beginning level, so they can make a difference. It'll be interesting to see how, because as I've done this before, you have some people who play the people of Middle-earth, and some people who are the Numenorians, and they've got to meet for the first time, and they've got to role play through that. And different groups, like when we had 5 groups simultaneously, had different outcomes, right? Sometimes, sometimes there was a little bit more conflict than was hoped for. So the Numenorians, of course, were like, hey, we're trying to be friendly here. Don't fight. You know, it's not like you can hurt us. Stand down. We're here to help.
So,
Other groups are like, oh, please help us, get us out of here. So it varies. Every group is different, so it's very fascinating to watch how those unfold. Back then, I could only record one or two. I had two handy cams. I couldn't stream live yet. We didn't have the bandwidth, but I would handy cam record and then upload, and so I wasn't able to record all the 5 tables. Now I've got the resources I can record.
Yeah, it should be interesting. It should be interesting to see a comparison between the interactions as people work through that scenario, that initial scenario, back, you said 2007?
Yeah.
And today, as societal culture and thinking are very different today than they were back then.
13 years ago, yeah. And there's a lot more fear. There's a lot more, everybody lives in a lot more fear now than they did back then.
Yeah, so it should be interesting watching the comparison between the two.
Yeah. It will be interesting, yeah. We will see how that unfolds. You know, and hopefully, so yeah. And again, I've got to go through and update the adventures, fill in any gaps. You know, because I've learned a lot in 13 years since I wrote those.
Yeah.
So I have to go through them again and go, oh, what was I thinking? Make changes and such. Get them be improved. But it's a lot. Cause, let me. I can go pull up the document now to see. I think it was one of my more massive endeavors. Let's see. There's another one that was a 5-parter when I was still doing the marathon Mercons. That it was also quite massive, and it all revolved around dragons. That'll be another. If anybody picks dragons as a theme, we'll bring that one back around because I never got to finish the last. It was too long. It was too much, so we never got to do the last adventure, which was the big finale. We never really got to do it. Okay, let's see. Gaming. Excuse me. Where is the Moot? 2007. Luckily, I still have all my maps and everything from then. Campaign, Gift Bearers of Numenor. Public releases. I'm going to look at more. So the initial one was a massive document that I broke into 5 parts, I believe. And the all combined snapshot, 9.6 megs. I've done a lot larger than that, 105 pages. And actually not bad formatting. Still some blank spaces in there. So actually that's not too much. But I think when I broke it into separate ones, that I added more detail in each of those separate ones. So I'll have to re-amalgamate this and see. Because if I look at part 1, First Contact, oh, no, it's just 11 pages. So I think that's without the, so it looks like I managed to break it down into more manageable bite-sized chunks. So that's not too bad, considering.
Yeah.
But it's still a fair amount of content. Which one was the dragon one? Campaign. Let's see, so 2009 Mercon 5, I think, was the big dragon one. Yep, Let Sleeping Dragons Lie was the name of it. And yeah, I'm still in the 100 range, so that's not as bad as I thought. So anyway, I got to go through all that and update it and improve it and such. But so I've got my work cut out for me, but at least I don't have to do it from scratch this time, which is part of why people voted, so that I wouldn't have to be killing myself the last few weeks trying to get it all ready. The material is mostly there already. So I don't know what else, other than do our usual read from letters next, unless you have something you want to cover before we do that. Hello? Did we lose you?
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. Baby was screeching.
Sure.
Let me see if I can pull up letters here.
Okay. So 178, I think, was the next one, right? Because 177 is what we finished.
Yep.
Okay. So do you want to take that one?
I'm still pulling it up here. It's looking like my other computer is being recalcitrant.
Right.
Remedial. There we go. Tolkien letters. Okay. And then 178, you say?
Yes. That's
Okay.
my understanding.
There we go. I jiggered my NAS because I ran out of space, so
Right.
had to quadruple the storage space
Yeah.
in the RAID. It's not everything is doing what it's supposed to.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
okay, 178, from a letter to Alan and Unwin, 12 December 1955. So let's see, mid-50s. Containing a reference to Sarhole, the hamlet, where Tolkien spent part of his childhood. By the way, there is no need to alter Mr. to Professor. In proper Oxford tradition, Professor is not a title of address, or was not, though the habit has drifted in from places where professors are powerful little domestic potentates.
Oh!
Are they indeed? Especially today. I am sure that without Professor, I should not have heard less about my Donnishness than no one would have said the Shire is not far off from North Oxford. It is, in fact, more or less a Warwickshire village of about the period of the Diamond Jubilee. This is as far away as the Third Age from that depressing and perfectly characterless straggle of houses north of Old Oxford, which has not even a postal existence.
So that was interesting about the titling and that it's drifted in as powerful little domestic potentates. Here, here. I've definitely run into that with academia getting so corrupted that way in ivory towers.
I've seen that done properly at the University of Washington, and I've seen it done very poorly at the University of Washington in my experience.
Yeah.
All within one little department, too.
Wow. Care to elaborate?
Well, so the smallest, the smallest engineering department is now called Human-Centered Design in Engineering.
Okay.
And it seems to be of two minds now. One is teaching human factors, the theory regarding man and the machine. And now they have this new subculture over here working on things like how social media affects elections and other potentate-like items.
Huh.
So I've seen it just in the department I graduated from. So,
Okay. Interesting.
yeah.
I wish Brian was here to or one of our other England experienced members to talk about Warwickshire and such, because I know nothing. I mean, he seems to cover the bases, but I'm sure Brian would have some additional insights and such otherwise.
Yes, I have a friend in Seattle who has inherited a house that might be described as this house is, and they're trying to figure out what to do with it, whether to sell it or invest a little bit of money to improve it, to get it rentable, or what should they do.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, you want me to read from the next one?
Okay.
179 from a letter to Hugh Brogan, 14th December 1955. Brogan wrote on 4th of December to say that he had, quote, recurrent nightmares, end quote, that he might have been stupid or tactless, or given a wrong impression of, quote, my real admiration for your great book, end quote. To which Tolkien responds, dismiss the nightmare. I can stand criticism, not being unduly puffed up by the success versus for the unexpected of the Lord of the Rings, even when stupid or unfair or even, as I occasionally suspect, a little malicious. Otherwise, I should be in a fine taking, what with emasculate and other kind adjectives. But you are welcome to let your pen run as it will. It is horrible writing letters to people with whom you have to be careful, since you give me such close attention and sensitive perception. Boy, there was a lot to unpack just in that little paragraph.
Yes. So he can stand criticism from strangers, but he has a hard time standing criticism from his very close friends.
Yeah, he takes it more personally.
If you recall his letter to Mr. Lewis.
Right. Yeah, he takes it much more personally.
Yes.
Partly because he probably expects that they should understand him better, knowing him.
Yes. And in this day and age of social media, a lot of strangers take pot shots, and you just should be able to let it roll off your back, but it stings more than it should.
Yeah.
For many people.
Well, we were talking earlier about that we're now in a culture that even just 15 years ago even after 9/11, wasn't anywhere near this level of fear and in response to it, outrage culture, right? We have the whole outrage and cancel culture thing that is a response to their fear. You know, people don't know what to do with all of that fear, so they lash out. And where you see it especially is, as he says, it is horrible writing letters to people with whom you have to be, quote-unquote, careful, right? You can't, it's impossible now to say or do or anything, whether we do it here on video, do it on social media, write a paper. People now, because their fear levels are so high, and have become inculcated into this outrage response, no longer give people the benefit of the doubt. Right there. So my mantra raising my kids and working with a lot of my clients and such is patience and love, patience and love. Right? And I sometimes have to come back to that touchstone and remind myself when I'm feeling indignant or impatient or want to, lambast somebody or whatever. But when you remember that patience and love perspective, so I volunteered for many years for the Dalai Lama's compassion awareness organization. Right now, they've got a stream going on about raising awareness for compassion for others, and taking that time and just nowhere is safe anymore to say or do anything without people just automatically labeling and assuming the worst. Identity politics, labeling and assuming the worst, rather than giving people the benefit of the doubt. It has become too dangerous to say or do anything anywhere publicly.
Yes.
And even when you think you're private, it turns out not to be. And I think Tolkien really, he says so much. He says he can stand criticism, not being unduly puffed up. So he's saying he's trying not to have too big an ego. But then he does say, even when stupid or unfair, or even, as I occasionally suspect, a little malicious, right? Which, people trolling, etc., intentionally trying to get that outrage going. Otherwise, I should be fine in taking what with emasculate and other kind adjectives, right? People intentionally use words to be hurtful and to get a rise. But he does say you're welcome to let your pen run as it will, so that you don't have to be so careful, and we'll have a conversation. We will have a civil discourse.
Yeah, exactly.
We will disagree.
Exactly.
We may not come to an agreement, but we will respect each other's differences and allow us to have our differences of opinion. And that's where I think we've lost the ultimate in diversity is being allowed to have diversity of thought and opinion is no longer allowed.
Yeah. Well, we wrote our first poison pen letter to the government this a couple weeks ago.
Oh yeah.
And my wife has sees in her mailbox that we're getting a response this afternoon in the mail. So we'll see what it's like. But essentially, it says that we haven't been doing anything regarding the vaccination of our child, but we haven't had a location to be able to do that because everything's closed.
Right. Yeah, the supply chain's been shut down.
So provide us a method and a location to do so, and we will.
Right.
But sending a letter saying that you're dangerously behind is not productive.
No, it's antagonistic.
And so that's what we said in the letter is, now don't tell us to do something. We have called every month the local health department to see when
it's not helpful to berate us. Yeah, provide some resources rather than berating us.
So you go do something other than writing letters.
Yeah.
And we CC'd our legislators and the local Department of Health director on it. So we'll see what comes of it.
Okay.
But it's stuff like that where there is a government who needs to know the perspective of a public person.
Well, yeah, have a
because
little
they
more
have lost
compassion.
touch.
have compassion for your circumstances rather than assume the worst.
Yes. So that we were incensed. I don't write a ton of poison pen letters. I am the type who will in my retirement because that's my personality. I just don't have time. But that one was over the top and needed to be responded to.
Okay.
So that's how I take criticism.
So if you want to ever check out the organization I was talking about, it's charterforcompassion.org.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I helped as a volunteer years ago when the Dalai Lama was doing a big national broadcast out of the Seattle stadium that the Chinese government hackers were attacking the streams and all that. And so I was helping here at the Spokane chapter with trying to get people engaged in that whole compassion, Charter for Compassion thing. So right now they've got a 24-hour webathon going on, August 14th to 15th, 8 p.m. to 5 p.m. So it'll be wrapping up pretty soon, Pacific time. People to start thinking with more compassion, you know, look at people with more compassion. I brought this up on multiple talk shows that I've been on, that people are because of their own fear, it's hard when you're afraid to care about others. But stop for a moment and be in tune with that fear that you have and realize that many around you have that fear as well, and have some compassion for the fear that they're experiencing rather than escalating further. And it really changes, like we were talking about with the adventure, it really changes the dynamic of that campaign if you come in with, you know, you can still be careful, you can still protect yourselves from those who mean you harm, while at the same time leaving yourself open to compassion for those who are just struggling, just like you are.
Yeah, and we've spent many extra volunteer hours this summer on that topic down here in South Farthing, where people love thy neighbor regardless of party because it's just the right thing to do.
Right.
And it's been good. It's been beneficial for me because I've actually been able to get to know my neighbors better.
Good.
And I'm an introvert, and I don't not normally and naturally do that. But through doing the right thing, it has allowed me that benefit.
Good. Well, the next letter is pretty long, so I think we'll leave it for when we've got more people. I think we'll just have to wrap up early today since we're not getting an audience response. There's nothing in Discord. There's nothing on our YouTube channel. There's nothing on Twitter. We don't use Facebook anymore. So I think, nobody else joined us in Jitsi. But thank you, Chris. I really appreciate you being here so that we could still have a meeting, because I wasn't going to do it alone. That's how I started this, was alone.
I'm talking to myself.
Yeah, I did start as monologues, basically reading and putting stuff out there, and then that got people joining, and it built from there, but I didn't want to have to do that again. Next month, we know next month, we've already got people signing up. So make sure you go to www.tolkienmoot.org/RSVP to sign up for Tolkienmoot, whatever part you can attend. If you just go to www.tolkienmoot.org, that's where you need to go. I've got some DNS changes, so if you go to straight tolkienmoot.org, it might not work right now. I'm fixing that. But and I'll be linking all over and spreading the word so people can sign up and participate either physically or remotely. Again, between the two trailers, the bus, multiple rooms downstairs, the main studio, we've got a capacity for half a dozen separate rooms so that we can have people without being high density, in addition to the streaming. So for those who actually want to be able to have a little bit of human interaction instead of video, that option is available under a limited basis. We only have 3 events left this year that we're doing with RPG Research and such. We have Tolkien Moot next month, September 19th, all day. Then we have our Halloween Call of Cthulhu gaming session that we do on Halloween night. We play late Cthulhu. And then we do a New Year's Eve, New Year's Day paranoia session. Those are the only events we have because we're just trying to catch up and do all our research until the next convention season starts next year. So anyway, I hope people will sign up for it. We've got a few people signed up already. Brian is doing a great job doing outreach. We're going to have those wonderful guest speakers. And I think it'll be a really good moot. I think it'll be fun. So thank you, Chris, for being here and helping keep this going. All the best to you and yours. And I'll catch you at the next moot next month, September 19th, and it'll be Tolkien Moot.
Okay.
Wherever we be well, and Namarie.